My parents demanded I sacrifice my future for my sister's lavish wedding. When I refused, they threw me out. Years later, I bought their house and served them an eviction notice on their anniversary. The first thing you'd notice about my family's home wasn't the manicured lawn or the imposing brick facade that screamed old money. It was the silence. It was a heavy, polished silence, the kind that absorbs sound and secrets in equal measure. In our family, what wasn't said was always more important than what was. And for 24 years, I had been the silent keeper of that silence, the fixer of problems that were never acknowledged, the steady pillar holding up a beautiful, hollow facade. My name is Sarah, and I was the responsible daughter, the good one. It was a role I had played for so long, I wasn't sure where the performance ended and I began. It was me at 17, using my summer job earnings to quietly pay off my mother's credit card bill after a shopping spree she called a necessary investment in her well-being. It was me at 21, spending a whole weekend untangling the mess my younger sister, Emily, had made with her university applications, a mistake she'd brushed off with a laugh and a careless, "Oops, guess I'm just too creative for paperwork." My mother, Carol, was a woman who moved through the world as if it were a stage designed for her. Her love was a spotlight, bright and warm when you were playing the part she'd written for you, but ice-cold the moment you missed your cue. Her tell, the sign that her mask of serene motherhood was slipping, was a tight, brittle smile that never reached her eyes. It was a smile that could freeze you from across a room. My father, Richard, was different. He was a man of calculated gestures and financial reports. His world was one of assets and liabilities, and he viewed his family through the same lens. His affection was a quiet approval, a nod over the top of the Wall Street Journal, granted only when the family stock was rising. His tell was a dismissive wave of his hand, a gesture that could erase you and your concerns from his reality in a single, fluid motion. And then there was Emily, my sister, the golden child. To the outside world, she was a sunbeam, vibrant, charming, with a laugh that could convince you of anything. But I knew the truth. Her light was fueled by the oxygen she sucked from every room, her life a carefully curated performance for her thousands of social media followers. She was the family's greatest asset, and her upcoming wedding to a man from a genuinely wealthy family was to be their crowning achievement. The beginning of the end started at our dining room table, a slab of polished mahogany that had witnessed more silent negotiations than a corporate boardroom. The air was thick with the scent of my mother's expensive perfume and unspoken anxiety. They were talking about the wedding, their voices a low, serious murmur. The floral arrangements from Du Bois are simply non-negotiable, Richard, my mother said, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Can you imagine the photos without them? We'd be a laughingstock. And the string quartet for the reception, my father added, not looking up from a spreadsheet on his tablet. The Bradfords had a full orchestra. A quartet is the bare minimum for us to maintain credibility. I sat there, pushing a piece of salmon around my plate, feeling the familiar weight settle in my chest. They weren't planning a wedding. They were orchestrating a merger. Finally, my father put down his tablet and looked at me. It was the look he used when he was about to close a deal. "Sarah," he began, his voice smooth and reasonable. "We have a slight liquidity issue regarding the final payment for the venue. A temporary cash flow problem." My mother jumped in, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "What your father means, darling, is that we need you to be a team player. Emily's happiness is all of our happiness, isn't it?" They didn't ask. They informed. They needed me to use my entire life savings, the $22,000 I had painstakingly saved from 2 jobs over 6 years. The money that was supposed to be my escape hatch, a down payment on my own apartment, and the tuition for a prestigious UX design boot camp that would finally launch my career. My future. It would just be a temporary loan, of course, Richard said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away the very notion of it being a problem. An investment in this family's future. I looked across the table at Emily. She was scrolling through her phone, probably admiring photos of her own face. She glanced up, sensing the attention, and gave me a brilliant, thoughtless smile. "Oh my God, Sarah, would you? You'd literally be saving my life." I owe you big time. Her promise felt as hollow as a chocolate Easter bunny. I looked at my mother's expectant face, her smile tight with warning. I looked at my father's impassive expression, his silent calculation of my worth. The silence stretched, heavy and demanding. Giving them the money felt like tearing out a page from my own future, a page I had written with tired hands and sleepless nights. But the thought of their disappointment, of the cold silence that would follow my refusal, felt worse. At least, that's what I told myself. Of course, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and thin, whatever the family needs. The tension in the room vanished. My father gave a satisfied nod and picked up his tablet. My mother's smile finally reached her eyes. Emily jumped up and gave me a quick, airy hug that smelled of Chanel No. 5. "You're the best," she chirped, before turning her attention back to her phone. The deal was done. I had sold my future for a moment of peace. Later that night, I sat in the dark of my room, the glow of my phone illuminating my face. I texted my best friend, Liam. He was the one person who saw the cracks in my family's perfect veneer. Me, I did it. I gave him the money. His reply came back instantly. "Liam, that's not a loan, Sarah. That's a ransom. Be careful." I stared at his words, a small, cold seed of truth in the suffocating darkness of my room. He was right, and the ransom I had just paid was only the first installment. The weeks following my loan were a masterclass in manipulation. The pressure I thought had been lifted was merely repositioning itself for a heavier blow. My parents began speaking of the groom's family, the formidable Sinclairs, with a new level of reverence. They started leaving brochures for the Sinclairs' global shipping company on the kitchen counter, or casually mentioning the family's philanthropic endeavors. It was a slow, deliberate campaign, and I was beginning to understand that I was its target. The other shoe dropped on a Tuesday night. It was another family dinner, another seemingly casual affair that felt as choreographed as a state banquet. My mother had made my favorite dish, a gesture that always preceded an ambush. "Sarah, darling," she began, placing a perfectly roasted piece of asparagus on my plate. "We were having lunch with the Sinclairs today. Such a wonderful family. They think the world of you." I murmured something non-committal, my stomach beginning to clench. "Their older son, David, was asking about you," Richard said, his tone matter-of-fact. "He's a very successful man, a partner at a major law firm. He's looking to settle down." I looked from my mother's eager face to my father's businesslike expression, and the trap sprung shut in my mind. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother sighed, a theatrical sound of long-suffering patience. "What we are saying, Sarah, is that we have been presented with a remarkable opportunity, a way to secure this family's future permanently. David Sinclair is interested in you. A union between you would formalize the partnership between our families." The room tilted. They weren't suggesting a date. They were proposing a merger, and I was the asset being acquired. "No," I said, the word tasting foreign and powerful on my tongue. "Absolutely not." The shift was instantaneous. My mother's face hardened. "Don't be so dramatic. This isn't some back-alley deal. This is an incredible opportunity for you. For us. For you." I corrected, my voice gaining strength. "You're talking about my life. I don't even know this man." "You will get to know him," my father's voice boomed, the first crack in his calm facade. "You will do your duty. This family has given you everything. This is how you repay us. It's not about fleeting feelings, Sarah. It's about loyalty. It's about legacy. After everything we've done for you," Carol cried, her voice rising. "After the beautiful life we've given you, you're so selfish. You're trying to tear this family apart with your childish rebellion." The gaslighting was so intense, it felt like the air was thinning. Every protest I made was twisted, reframed as a flaw in my character. My desire for my own life was selfish. My refusal to be sold was disloyal. My identity was being systematically erased and replaced with the word ungrateful. I fled the table that night, the weight of their disappointment chasing me up the stairs. The battle lines had been drawn. The breaking point came at the rehearsal dinner. It was held at a ridiculously expensive restaurant downtown, the kind with low lighting, hushed waiters, and floral arrangements that cost more than my first car. I felt like a ghost at the feast, watching a movie of my own life from a great distance. I was seated next to David Sinclair, a man with a polite smile, cold eyes, and the unnerving habit of looking at me like I was a column of figures he was adding up in his head. I survived the dinner by texting Liam under the table. Me. I'm at the rehearsal dinner, seated next to my future husband, apparently. Send help. Liam breathed. You have a voice. Remember that. You are not their property. His words were a lifeline in a sea of hypocrisy. Then, during the toast, my father stood up, champagne glass in hand. He spoke eloquently about Emily and her fiancé, about the joy of family and the promise of the future. He was charming, witty, and utterly false. And as we celebrate this beautiful union, he said, his voice resonating through the private dining room, I am thrilled to hint at another upcoming celebration. Another union that will truly solidify the bond between the Sinclairs and our family. He raised his glass and gestured, almost imperceptibly, in my direction, to future alliances. A ripple of polite applause went through the room. David Sinclair gave me a small, proprietary smile. Emily looked thrilled. My mother was beaming. In that moment, they had stolen my voice, my future, and announced it to the world as a done deal. Liam's words echoed in my head. You have a voice. Fueled by a surge of adrenaline and years of repressed rage, I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I placed them flat on the table to steady myself. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. I'd just like to add something, I said, my voice trembling but clear. I am so incredibly happy for my sister Emily and for her future husband. I wish them a lifetime of happiness. I paused, taking a breath and looking directly at my father. But I feel I must be clear. I will not be getting married. My future and any alliances I make will be my own. You could have heard a pin drop. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint clinking of ice in a distant water glass. The smiles on my parents' faces had frozen, then shattered. Emily's face was a mask of horror and embarrassment. David Sinclair's polite smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of disbelief and annoyance. I had done the one thing our family never did. I had told the truth in public. The car ride home was a tomb of silent fury. The moment the front door closed behind us, the storm broke. How could you? My mother shrieked, her voice a raw nerve. You humiliated us. You humiliated me. In front of everyone. The Sinclairs. You have ruined everything. You have made your choice, my father said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was colder and more terrifying than my mother's rage. You chose to stand against this family. You chose to be a liability instead of an asset. He walked over to me, his face an unreadable mask. Therefore, you are no longer a part of it. He held out his hand. The key. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The final transaction. The old Sarah would have begged, cried, tried to explain. But the old Sarah had died in that restaurant. I looked my father directly in the eye, something I had rarely dared to do. My hand didn't shake as I took the single key to the front door off my keychain. I didn't throw it at him. I placed it deliberately on the cold marble of the entryway table. The small metallic click echoed in the cavernous hall. It was the sound of a lock turning for the last time. Your things will be in trash bags on the curb in the morning, he said, his voice flat. Don't come back. I turned without a word and walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. Standing on the manicured stone pathway under the cold, indifferent stars, I didn't feel homeless. I felt free. A terrifying, stark, and absolute freedom. I pulled out my phone and dialed Liam's number. My voice broke on the first word. Liam, I'm on my way, he said, his voice calm and steady. You're not alone. The first year of my new life was forged in hardship. It was a blur of exhaustion and cheap coffee. Liam's couch became my world, his tiny apartment a sanctuary from the life that had ejected me. He never once made me feel like a burden. He was the family I had chosen, a brother in every way that mattered. But the shame of my situation was a physical weight. I was a 24-year-old college dropout with no savings, crashing on a friend's sofa. By my family's standards, I was an absolute failure. I took 2 jobs, By day, I was a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, my hands raw from hot water and cleaning solutions, my hair perpetually smelling of fried onions. I come home, my feet aching, my pockets heavy with a few dollars in tips, and crash for a few hours. Then, my second alarm would go off. My night job was stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store, a ghostly existence under the hum of fluorescent lights. The silence of the empty aisles was a different kind of silence than the one I grew up in. This one was peaceful. It was mine. In those quiet hours, my anger became my fuel. My grief became my focus. I was haunted by my father's words, liability, bad investment. I vowed to myself, in the stillness of the canned goods aisle at 3 a.m., that I would become the best investment I ever made. Every spare dollar I earned went into my new education. I couldn't afford a boot camp anymore, so I built my own. I used the computers at the public library. I bought secondhand textbooks. I devoured free online courses and tutorials on coding and UX design. Liam's old, slow laptop became my forge. From 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., when the world was asleep, I wasn't just tired, I was building. I was learning a new language, one of logic and systems, where effort produced a result and your worth wasn't determined by who you married. It was a grueling, thankless existence. There were moments of despair, so profound I'd just sit in front of the screen and cry, the lines of code blurring into a testament to my failure. But then, a piece of code would finally work, a design element would click into place, and a tiny spark of victory would ignite in the darkness. It was a feeling of accomplishment so pure and so completely my own, it was addictive. After 2 years, I had a portfolio. It wasn't polished, but it was real. I started applying for internships, sending out dozens of applications, and getting dozens of rejections. Then, one day I got a call. A small tech startup was willing to take a chance on me. The pay was barely enough to cover my share of Liam's rent, but it was a foot in the door. I walked into that office like a soldier entering a new battlefield. I was hungrier than anyone else because I knew what it felt like to starve. I took on the tasks no one wanted. I stayed late. I came in early. I asked questions. I learned. I absorbed everything. My boss, a tough but fair woman named Tina, noticed. She didn't care about my family name or my lack of a degree. She cared about my work ethic and the clean, efficient code I produced. Slowly, things began to change. Internship turned into a junior position. Junior position turned into a full-time job with benefits. I finally moved into my own tiny apartment. The first night, I slept in my own bed, under my own roof. I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of profound, bone-deep relief. I was building a life from the ashes of the one that had been stolen from me. 5 years after I walked out of my parents' house, I was no longer the girl on the couch. At 29, I was a respected project lead at a major tech firm. I managed a team. I had a portfolio of successful projects, a healthy 401k, and a confidence I had earned with my own 2 hands. I hadn't spoken to my family since that night. I had heard through the grapevine that Emily's marriage was as perfect as her Instagram feed, and that my parents continued their charade of upper-class serenity. They were a ghost limb, an ache I sometimes felt but had learned to live without. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Sarah, is it you?" The voice was thin, reedy, and familiar. "Aunt Susan," I asked, my heart beginning to hammer in my chest. My mother's estranged sister. We hadn't spoken in a decade. "Yes, honey. I'm not well. And there's something I have to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." Her voice was weak, but her words were heavy. She told me she had seen a post from Emily on Facebook, a gushing tribute to her parents on their wedding anniversary, and it had filled her with a guilt she could no longer carry. "It wasn't just the wedding, Sarah," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Your parents, they were in trouble long before that. Deep trouble." She proceeded to tell me the real story. Years before, when Emily had decided she wanted to be a fashion influencer, my parents had funded her business by secretly taking out a massive second mortgage on the family home. Emily's venture had crashed and burned within a year, leaving them with a mountain of high-interest debt they couldn't pay. The money I had given them for the wedding venue had been a lie. It was a desperate, last-ditch payment to stop the bank from foreclosing on that secret loan. The money I had saved for my future had been used to plug a hole from their past, a hole created by their reckless favoritism and deceit. The phone felt cold against my ear. It wasn't just that they had asked me to sacrifice. It was that they had built the altar on a foundation of lies. They hadn't just neglected my future. They had actively stolen from it to finance their golden child's failures. The tears that came weren't hot with rage. They were ice cold. It was the kind of crying you do when a part of you has died, and you know it's never coming back. The naive girl who hoped her family would one day see her worth was gone forever. In her place, something else was born. Something cold, clear, and purposeful. My grief had crystallized into a single, sharp objective: justice. Not petty revenge. A rebalancing of the scales. A month later, I was scrolling through real estate websites, a habit I'd picked up while planning my own financial future. And then I saw it. My childhood home. The listing was stark. PRE foreclosure. The bank was finally calling its debt. The next day, I was in the office of a man named Mr. Henderson, a lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharp smile. I laid out the situation. He listened, nodding slowly. The plan is not to act emotionally, he advised, his voice calm and precise. The plan is to act like a business. We will form an anonymous LLC. You will be shielded. The transaction will be clean. He was my architect. He gave my cold fury a legal, logical structure. I drained my investment accounts, emptied my savings. It was every dollar I had fought for, every late night, every greasy diner shift. I had enough for a massive down payment that made the bank see my anonymous LLC as a serious, low-risk buyer. My high salary and perfect credit score secured the rest of the financing with ease. While the sale was in closing, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Emily. Emily. Sarah, I know we haven't talked. I'm so sorry for how things happened. Mom and Dad are having a really hard time. I was wondering if you could help out. Just a loan. $50K. The audacity was breathtaking. I typed back a simple, two-word reply. Me no. Her response was instantaneous, the mask of remorse dissolving into pure, entitled rage. Emily, you owe us. After everything they did for you, Mom and Dad ruined their credit for my business. They even used your stupid college fund for the down payment on that loan. You're just a selfish BTCH who abandoned us. Asterisk. My hands were perfectly steady as I took a screenshot. I saved the image to a secure folder on my phone. The label was simple: leverage. She had just confessed to the entire fraud in writing. She had just handed me the key to the entire kingdom. The day the sale closed was a crisp, clear day in October. It was also my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. I imagined them in the evening, sitting in the formal living room, raising a glass of expensive wine to themselves, to their endurance, to the beautiful lie they had maintained for so long. It was on that day that I instructed Mr. Henderson to act. A certified letter arrived at their door the next morning. It wasn't a greeting card. It was a legal notice from a company they had never heard of, Northwood Properties, LLC. The notice was brief and brutal. It informed them that the property had been sold and that the new owner required them to vacate the premises within 30 days, as per state law. Their panic must have been immediate. A flurry of calls to the bank confirmed the news. Their home was gone, but I wasn't done. The next day, a second letter arrived. This one was from the same LLC. It contained a rental application packet. It graciously offered them the opportunity to remain in the house as tenants. The proposed rent was 3 times their old mortgage payment, the current, accurate market value for a house of that size in that neighborhood, a value they had ignored for years while their debt spiraled. They demanded a meeting with the new owner. Mr. Henderson, acting as the LLC's representative, arranged it. They were to be at the house at 10 a.m. on Saturday. I arrived at 9:55 a.m. I wore a tailored navy blue suit that had cost more than my first month's salary at the diner. My hair was pulled back in a severe professional knot. I didn't knock. I used my new key. I was standing in the center of the marble-floored entryway when they came downstairs. The look on their faces was the climax of a 5-year-long story. It started with confusion, then shifted to disbelief, then morphed into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. "Sarah," my mother whispered, her hand flying to her chest. "You," my father breathed, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. They stammered. They threatened. They accused me of being a monster, of orchestrating this cruel, vindictive plot. "How could you do this to your own parents?" Carol wailed, the practiced tears finally coming. "To throw us out on the street?" "I'm not throwing you out," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen lake. "I'm offering you a lease agreement at fair market value. It's a simple business transaction. This is our home." Richard roared. "We built this life. You built it on lies." I countered, my voice never rising. "You built it with money you stole from my future to pay for your past mistakes." "That's a vicious lie," my mother shrieked. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took out my phone, opened the photo gallery, and held it out. The screen glowed with Emily's furious, incriminating texts. "Mom and Dad ruined their credit for my business. They even used your stupid college fund for the down payment on that loan." I watched the fight drain out of them. The color leached from my father's face. My mother crumpled into a nearby armchair, her sobs suddenly real and ragged. They were beaten, not by my anger, but by the stark, undeniable truth in their golden child's own words. It was checkmate. They signed the lease. They had no choice. The year that followed was a quiet, methodical reversal of power. I was their landlord, a cold, professional entity they had to send a large check to on the 1st of every month. The check was never late. In January, the furnace broke. It was the coldest week of the year. My mother called me, her voice attempting its old tone of maternal command. "Sarah, the heat is out. It's freezing in here. You need to do something immediately." I let a professional pause hang in the air. "I have received your maintenance request," I said, my tone polite and distant. "A technician will be scheduled to arrive within 48 business hours, as stipulated in Section 7B of your lease agreement." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line before I politely ended the call. The furnace was fixed in 24 hours, but the point had been made. I was not her daughter. I was the property manager. Emily, predictably, retaliated. Her Facebook page became a stage for vague but vicious posts about the tragedy of elderly parents being abused by their heartless, ungrateful child. Friends and distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years liked the posts, sending me silent, judgmental messages. It stung, but only for a moment. I discussed it with Liam. He looked at me over a beer and said, "Their opinion is not your reality. You know the truth. That's all that matters." He was right. Her words were meaningless noise. My silence was my power. The final test came in the spring. My mother called me, crying. This time, the tears sounded expertly rehearsed. "Sarah, your father, his heart," she choked out. "The doctor says the stress is too much. This house, the rent, it's killing him. I'm begging you, as your mother, sell us the house back. We'll find a way to pay you. A reasonable price." The old Sarah would have cracked. The old Sarah would have been consumed by guilt. But I'd spent years building a new Sarah, one with boundaries made of steel. I recognized the move for what it was, a last-ditch, desperate gambit to find a crack in my armor, using my father's health as a weapon. My voice was gentle, but the words were granite. "I'm very sorry to hear Dad is unwell. I hope he has a speedy recovery." I paused. "My offer is the same one that will be available to any other interested party when the time comes. The current market value. Please send my best to Dad." I hung up before she could respond. I had passed the final test. It was after that call that I had my final realization. As long as I owned that house, I was still tied to them. It was a trophy, yes, but it was also a chain. It was a weapon they would always, in their desperation, try to use against me. The only way to be truly free, to truly cut the cord, was to remove the house from the board entirely. I listed the property a week later. It sold in 5 days for well over the asking price. I took the significant profit and used it as seed money to leave my job and start my own tech consulting firm. On the day the new family moved in, I drove by. I watched from a distance as a young couple carried their laughing toddler over the threshold. They were painting the front door a bright, cheerful yellow. They were filling the house with new light, new memories, washing away the polished silence I'd grown up with. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel hatred. I felt nothing. A quiet, peaceful, and complete absence of feeling. The last chain had broken. Today, I sit in the bright, airy office of my own company. On the wall is a blueprint for my newest project. I am not just surviving. I am building. I am creating. I am the architect of my own life, a life built on a foundation of truth and self-worth. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose to stop letting them define you. You can walk away from the gilded cage, no matter how beautiful it looks from the outside. You can build your own future on your own terms. My question to you is, what bridge did you have to burn to find your own peace?